Lots to cover. But first, some good news from Alabama. Good news. How's that for a start? Mother Angelica will be the first religious inducted into the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame. The induction ceremony will take place on March 5th at Judson College at their campus in Morrison, Alabama. Previous inductees include Coretta Scott King, Harper Lee, and others. Glad to see Mother receive a bit of the recognition she greatly deserves. Now, global religious persecution continues to be a problem all over the world. Earlier this month, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the creation of the International Religious Freedom Alliance, seeking to combat religious persecution. Joining me now with his analysis is the Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom at the U.S. State Department, Ambassador Sam Brownback. Thank you. Welcome back.
You bet,
Great
Raymond.
to see you.
Good to join you.
I want to start with this Religious Freedom Alliance. What is the focus? What is it designed to do, and what are your hopes for it?
It's designed to be an activist club. And by that I mean we want a group of nations that will come together and actually push aggressively on the issue of religious freedom. This is something that's deep in the heart of the United States. We believe in it, although it's taken us a while really to kind of get our act together to how do we push it and go at it. Well, now we're really trying to get an alliance of nations, and we've got it. We've got 27 countries. We've got more that want to join, and we're going to use this, and we're going to be a part of this to push open these gates of religious persecution around the world that have been increasingly going shut around the world.
Yeah. And what's been the response? What are people telling you? We've had some of the ambassadors in other countries sit here and tell us about their input, what they're trying in their country. What are you hearing?
It's been interesting. We're getting already projects put forward by other countries saying, hey, we ought to do this, we ought to as a group do that, or how many of you would be willing to join us on this? And one of the best things that I heard was a country of particular concern, that's our Bad Boys Club.
Right.
One of the ambassadors there was telling me, you know, it's really good the United States is pushing this. This is a key thing to be pushing around the world and to getting more people to open up on religious freedom. It's good for the bad actors if they would open up on this, but a lot of times they view it as we've got to have a substantial outside force to cause us to move, to be able to overcome a lot of maybe domestic inherent things that are against religious minorities. That's usually who it's against. It's usually a religious majority that pushes against a religious minority.
Yeah. The 2020 World Watch List, published by Open Doors, found that persecution among Christians is really at an unprecedented level. 1 in 8 Christians face persecution daily. Now, much of the persecution is being done in communist countries or places where there's radical Islamic influence. How do you go about advancing religious freedom in these places, places like North Korea or Pakistan? How do you do that?
Well, some of them are tougher than others, that's for sure. And North Korea has been a very difficult case. But I think the thing you do in these cases is you get an alliance of countries, A. B, you start showing these countries that this is in their best interest to open up to religious freedom. If you want to grow your economy, if you want to have less terrorism, the right answer is religious freedom, and we've got the data to show it. And if you want to really be a country that's moving forward with the rest of the world, this is this fundamental human right that you have to guarantee. We're starting to see more Muslim-majority countries, the government, saying, we've got to do this. This sort of monochromatic view of religion that everybody has to fit within our Sunni or Sufi design of Islam is a loser for your country to grow and prosper. It won't work. You can't attract the capital. You can't attract the outside people. You can't attract the different ideas. And they're starting to feel it and see it, and some of them are starting to change.
Is that the incentive that you offer them? Is that the carrot that you offer these countries? Look, you're holding back the possibilities and the opportunities for your country by pursuing this path?
Yeah, more so. And we're starting to see some nations look at it and saying, you know, this isn't working for us. This is a dead-end street. And usually what they're doing is they're kowtowing to some majority religious population that they look at and they know this isn't the right way for us. This isn't a good thing for us as a nation. So they know it. They're just trying to figure out how do we move it along, and we're going to add pressure to that.
Yeah. Naturally, China comes out in this conversation regularly about Christian persecution. That World Watch list I mentioned a moment ago, roughly they claim 100 million Christians have been persecuted in China. In fact, the director of Open Doors said China is a blueprint for dictators around the world. Are you afraid that others might take that blueprint up? Because here you have a country that is growing economically, that is a powerhouse, that is a military juggernaut in the region. What do you say to them?
We're very concerned. It's my number 1 concern because, and it's not because it may be the deadliest place. There are places that it's very deadly to be a Christian or any faith. They've got 1 million Muslims in concentration camps right now. They've already decimated culturally Tibet and the Tibetan Buddhist religion, and they're going after the Christians and everybody else. What I'm really concerned about is their use of these artificial intelligence, high technology, data-driven algorithms that start targeting people because they practice their faith.
Right.
And then start not just putting them in jail, because I think the face of oppression in the future will be less people put in jail and killed and more people marginalized in the society. You can't get a...
You won't get a job, you won't get a license.
You can't get your kids in school, you can't get this license. Now, if you had just stopped going to the mosque or to the church, everything goes fine for you. Everything's fine. Well, and then anybody that pings you on the cell phone gets your same bad social credit score in
they're connected, yeah.
Because that creates the social pressure on you. Will you stop going to church? You're hurting me.
What can we do about the biometrics, the cameras now, facial recognition on churches? We're hearing reports of that throughout China. I mean, what can we do as an outside government to pressure them to move away from this?
You know, I've heard from Chinese Christians saying they're more concerned about this religious oppression now than the Cultural Revolution under Mao. They think it's more sinister. They think it's more difficult to overcome. The Mao era created a group of saints and really people that would speak out in the culture. This one they're really scared of. I think the thing we can do is really go at the technology, and you're seeing the administration doing this now, limiting the use of U.S. technology into that system, limit the technology from China being able to come into our system.
This Huawei thing has become a major obsession for Secretary Pompeo.
And should be.
Yeah, where we're denying Huawei access to certain part manufacturers in the United States, which they were relying on for their technology, and trying to stop European countries from embracing Huawei, which is they're promising 5G overnight, a network that you can put up and build yourself, and they're doing it cheaply, which is always the allure.
And the results end up in Beijing. So you plug the system in here, and where's the back door? Where does this technology and information end up? And how can it be used? So I know this is probably the biggest way we can push back. You know, it's interesting. I'm reading now a book on Reagan as a crusader against communism, against Soviet communism, and he did for decades. When he was on GE radio, he was against it. I am convinced if he were around now, he would be coming after the Chinese communists, and he would be saying, look at what they're doing, and look at how much oppression they're putting in their society. And he was not satisfied with détente. He said détente just let them, froze us in position and let them improve. It's interesting read right now when you think of it, of what would Reagan be saying right now, and he would be going after the communist Chinese.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Look, I want to talk a moment while we're on this topic. Is there the political will to say no to the Chinese, given the economic incentives, the cheap labor, the speed with which technology can be produced in that country and other goods, as opposed to Europe or in the United States?
God bless Donald Trump. I mean, before, we just haven't had presidents willing to fight with the Chinese. And we've known this is happening for decades. And we've seen it, and most of us, and I put myself, unfortunately, in the category saying, well, we think the communists will grow
if we
out
trade
of it.
with them, they'll become Ohio.
They'll help us. They'll change over time. Just look at what happened in Taiwan and South Korea and Japan. Well, they haven't. It hasn't happened. And this president has been willing to take them on. And, you know, that's why I say God bless him, because nobody else has been willing to do it. And I really think this is one of the key things of his presidency, is finally confronting China as they should have been confronted decades ago.
I got to talk about Taiwan. You mentioned it a moment ago. You visited Taiwan. They were not included in this Religious Freedom Alliance launched earlier this month. Why not?
It's an alliance of nations, and under our one China policy, we consider the mainland China and Taiwan not that case. And this is an alliance of nations. This is a phase one of the alliance, and we're going to continue discussion. I had discussions this week with Taiwanese officials, so we'll see where that moves forward. But right now, this is an alliance of nations.
I need to talk. You mentioned the Uyghur Muslims who are in these concentration camps. They've faced very little pushback, the Chinese, from Muslim-majority countries. Yes. They've been very reluctant to jump in. In fact, the Pakistan Prime Minister, he came out and said, wait a minute, Beijing was with us when the cards were down, so we're basically going to sit back. Does that stun you, that these are people, yes, co-religionists who are just willing to lie down, yes, for China?
It does. And I've said it to a number of them. I said, what's going on here? So I've raised it a number of times. At the bottom line of it, the Chinese play rough. Mm-hmm. They play with dollars. They push back very aggressively, mm-hmm, and I think what you're seeing is the impact of that on a number of these countries. That we have a certain set of rules, and people see the United States and they know our rules and our Constitution, and we follow these things, mm-hmm, and we go by it. So it's like we've got these Marcus of Queensberry rule, right, that we fight by. Chinese don't fight by those.
No, they're asymmetrical. They're playing every angle.
Just, and that's what we get told, mm-hmm, by these countries, is they play rougher.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ronald Reagan a minute ago. Ronald Reagan wasn't in a town. The Hollywood then wasn't owned by China or controlled by it the way it is today. That market is very reliant on Asian distribution, video sales in those markets. In fact, the whole budgets are predicated on that. We didn't do business with Soviet Russia, and maybe that should be the approach now vis-a-vis China, given the profound human rights and religious outrages happening in that country.
They've been a big enabler of human rights abuses, that alone what they're doing in their own country. But I think you're seeing the agenda and the backbone of the United States stiffen up, and this is a bipartisan, yeah, issue, mm-hmm, I'd point out. I mean, the president, yeah, deserves all the credit for starting the fight, but this is backed by Republicans, yeah, and Democrats and broad swatches of the U.S. public. Well, they're very concerned about it.
I was delighted to see last week Cardinal Zen sat where you're sitting, the Cardinal Zen, former Bishop of Hong Kong, who's been a, yes, warrior on the issues, yes, of human rights and religious rights for his people. Nancy Pelosi gave him honor last week. Hats off to her for that. He awakened everybody to the Zionization happening in these churches, religious texts being perverted, clergy being rounded up. What can we do to help these people while they watch the faith that many of them fought and died for, or watched relatives die for, evaporate before their eyes?
Yeah, I think we stand with them. I think we continue to put them on like country of particular concern. I think we continue to raise the issue. I think we continue to build these alliances to push back. Then the alliance, a number of these countries are pushing back against China, and China tried to dissuade countries from joining this alliance. Mm-hmm. They were actively out there saying,
really,
don't join this alliance. They were actively out there trying to get countries not to come to our ministerials. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to keep pushing against that, and we need to provide backbone to these other countries, mm-hmm, to stand up to a bully, yeah, to stand up to what China's doing. They may play rough, but we're going to play tough. Mm-hmm. We're going to push back.
Should tariffs and trade be tied to human rights and religious rights?
We've got a series of sanctions that are usable under the country of particular concern and religious freedom issues. Mm-hmm. And I think all tools should be looked at as possibilities and ones that we can use. We know the economic issues are ones that the Chinese will pay attention to, yeah, a lot more than a lot of times rhetoric that we'll put forward, and we'll, mm-hmm, accuse them of different things, and they're kind of, yeah, fine. Yeah. But when you start touching the money.
Well, or when you begin broadcasting the truth. Look, I've seen colleagues at the Wall Street Journal who've reported on this. Yeah. You saw what happened. 3 of those reporters rounded up, evicted from the country. We regularly get hit. When I have Cardinal Zen on, or I have somebody talking about religious persecution, probably after your appearance, Ambassador, you'll get these, the bots out there who, well, I'm a priest in China, and how dare you say this? I'm sorry, many of these people, God bless them, they're compromised too and in deep trouble because they have to serve their masters. So I get it. As you said earlier, Chinese are playing on 3 or 4 different levels. We usually play on one. I need to shift a bit to sexual violence toward Christian women that we're seeing used all over the world, particularly in Africa, Boko Haram. And these incidents, they're really underreported, but some reportage says there could be as many as 23 per day, especially in Africa, spreading to Pakistan and India. How do you work with governments in these places to curb this type of violence that, A, doesn't get reported on regularly, but we know Boko Haram in Nigeria and other organizations are implementing it as a tool?
I think we need to do more. I think we need to get the data up and lift it up more to where people can see and know it. Any number of places I've been when I do interviews with women in the field, this issue comes up. And it's either happened to them or it's happened to a daughter or a mother. There is a prevalence of this, and it's a tool of war.
Right.
And it's a tool of intimidation of the utmost degree. So I think we need to lift it up more as an issue and make it more of a centerpiece issue. It's one that we raise, but this is the sort of thing that I think that the Religious Freedom Alliance can do more of. Like, religious institutions get purposely attacked in conflict zones as a cultural dagger.
Right.
Well, women get attacked often as just this sort of dagger going right at the culture and who the place is as well, and an intimidation factor.
Right.
And we need to really, I think, be more protective of those places that the terrorists and others go at.
No, they're soft targets, and very powerful and potent.
Powerful targets. Yeah.
Here in the United States, we saw an uptick in anti-Semitism. The Little Sisters of the Poor are back at the Supreme Court, still fighting the contraceptive mandate. I want to play something for you. This is last month. Attorney General William Barr had this to say during an interview about religious liberty in the United States. Listen.
The problem today is not that religious people are trying to impose their views on non-religious people. It's the opposite. It's that militant secularists are trying to impose their values on a religious people, and they're not accommodating the freedom of religion of people of faith.
Now, I know your expertise is international religious freedom, but can you comment at all on the contraction of religious freedom in the United States itself and what we should or could be doing?
Yeah, that's the one place I don't have portfolio is the United States. But I will say on Attorney General Barr, his speech at Notre Dame, outside of the president's speeches, is one of the great speeches of this administration. And he was really putting his finger on this topic. And I think a lot of people really resonated with that, and they were saying, you know, what's going on in our own nation? So I hope that the issue gets discussed more. It's obviously an issue before the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So it's making its way up the statutes and for as far as the courts, but it needs to make its way into the culture. That's where the discussion needs to happen more now, is in it's going to make its way up through the legal system, but it needs to happen in the culture, and we need to be, as a country, standing up as the beacon of hope on freedom, and that freedom includes religious freedom as a foundational one. As long as you're peacefully practicing your faith, you should be entitled to do that.
Yeah, and fly your colors. Yeah, people are very reticent these days. They've gone into hiding almost. It's as if it's something dirty. I mean, and the culture is, there's cultural pressure for it to be so. I want to move on to a State Department-sponsored event you took part in about the Abrahamic Faith Initiative. This happened in Rome. Tell me about it. What was the intention? Who came?
Well, the intention of it was to get the three great monotheistic faiths in the world, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, together around a common thought that our faith does not support the use of violence in promoting the faith. So many places around the world, religion is being used as a tool of war, when religion is a tool of peace. And it should be used that way. And so what we're trying to do is to get the Abrahamic faith together, the ones that all claim Abraham as the starter of it. We could all line them up in front of Abraham's tomb and say, let's be a tool for peace and peace building around the world.
Ambassador Sam Brownback, always a pleasure. Hope you'll come back.
I'll do it.
Thank you. Thanks very much. You can follow the work of Ambassador at Large Sam Brownback on behalf of international religious freedom at the U.S. State Department. Go to their website, state.gov.